What the hell is Dune Awakening? If you're anything like me, you've been intrigued by Dune Awakening since its announcement. But again, if you're anything like me, you have no idea what the hell this game is. Is it an MMO, a survival game, a PvP game, a survival PvP game like Rust, an RPG, or a story game? Needless to say, I was a bit confused on what the game is. I do know, however, that developers Funcom was a familiar name to me, as I had played Conan Exiles in the past, so is Dune Awakening just Conan Exiles with a Dune coat of paint? And if so, is that a good thing or a bad thing? The only real thing I had seen gameplay wise was paid streamers low-key glazing the game maybe just a little too much, but I never saw any actual gameplay or content. But hey, they did love to talk about how the footprints blow away in the wind, so I was sent a code for the Dune Awakening open beta and decided the only way to figure out what this game was and if it deserved all the glaze was to play it by myself. Unfortunately, if you had any of those questions like I did, a lot of you probably didn't get to answer them for yourselves, due to the fact that the game had a limited supply of beta keys, and already I wasn't too impressed with this. Many companies have been hopping on this trend of artificially making beta keys limited. Off the top of my head, Valorant and Marvel Rivals both do the same thing, and while I won't defend either of those games, at the very least the beta was a lot longer. I think this trend is frustrating and quite frankly dumb, especially since there are so many other games out right now. It seems counterproductive to fight for a gamer's attention for a short weekend-long beta. That being said, it didn't seem impossible to get a key, but again, I was sent a code and didn't have to fight or hunt one down. From what I understand, there were three methods of getting a key. The first was requesting access through the Steam store, and it seemed like most did not get in. The second was the easiest, which were Twitch drops, but they weren't live throughout the weekend. I believe Funcom hosted a Twitch stream where you were able to attain a key, and it seemingly was quite easy. The last was the hardest, and that was winning a giveaway for a code. I mention all this because, as I said earlier, it's frustrating. People can't try the game out and decide if they like it, and finally because it made me experience the game solo, so I can't attest to the co-op elements of the game. I had my friends try to get keys or gain access, but most of them were busy, so beyond requesting access on Steam, they weren't able to wait in Twitch stream or win a giveaway. They had time to game this weekend, but their time was not worth searching or waiting around for a key to the game they would only be able to play for the next day or so. Honestly, the Twitch drop betas are just a trend that needs to die. And while it may have worked for Rivals and Valorant, I don't think it worked here, and a lot of people potentially interested in this game are left in the dark. So that was another thing I set out to do. Give you answers to your questions and help you decide if this game is worth the asking price of $50. So finally, we can move on to my 2.5 hours of Dune Awakening I played, and hopefully you can come out leaving more informed on whether or not the game is worth it for you. Starting my journey, the Paul Atreides told me how special I was, but also explained the basic plot of the game. A small disclaimer, while I do like the Dune franchise and am a fan of the movies, I'm not the most knowledgeable on how the world works. The Lisan al-Gaib explains that Dune Awakening takes place in a different universe where he was never born, and said his mother had a daughter. So the House of Atreides pretty much never fell, and the events of the book/movies never happened. But I'll let my friend Paul do a little explaining here.
What if my mother had obeyed her orders and given birth to a girl? Everything would change. Dr. Yue exposed before his betrayal. A world where my father lives. House Atreides surviving the Battle of Arrakeen. Sardaukar deployed to protect the spice melange. A war of assassins spreading across the planet. Fremen exterminated. No Muad'Dib. No Lisan al-Gaib. No Kwisatz Haderach. All of my visions lead to horror. Except for this one. This one leads to you.
Already a quite interesting premise, then after the cutscene I was able to create my character. Honestly, I was impressed with the character creator. While not the most in-depth, it's good enough to keep most players happy. After creating my character, I was subjected to the box test, and my character must have been stronger than me because I would have folded, but he is for sure stronger than Paul because he didn't even let out a single peep. The voice lady, sorry I can't remember her name, told me to go to Arrakis and find the Fremen, which apparently had been wiped out, but I guess we're not so much wiped out. So they sent me away on a ship towards the surface of the planet, but before we could land, we were shot down by a mysterious stranger. Upon hitting the ground quite hard while falling in and out of consciousness, we see that same stranger kill our friends on the ship but seemingly save us. Either my strikingly good looks really resonated with this guy or something else is afoot. I woke up in a cave and lived through it, learning the basics of crafting and scavenging. Of course, I was also explained the importance of water. Instead of a typical food system you would see in most survival games, the only essential you need to worry about is water. And I really like this. I think it very much diversified the gameplay. Here's where I really started to pick up what this game was, especially when I started climbing. This game immediately reminded me of Conan Exiles. Although I never got far into that game, I could see the resemblance immediately. After exiting the cave, I met up with my new friend that had just tried to kill me, Xantara. Again, this intro was kind of reminding of Conan, where you create your character, a cutscene is played, and then you're set loose in the world. However, Dune already seemed much more linear. Although, at the beginning of the game, you are given the option to play in a more guided way, doing quests and unlocking research items, or you can choose to start out with all the essentials already unlocked and potentially skipping the opening. Of course, I picked the linear option for my first playthrough. My new friend sent me to fight through a wreckage of a nearby ship and retrieve an emergency transmitter. He also warned me of a sandstorm approaching. So I set out to retrieve this transmitter as quickly as I could and was introduced to the resource gatherer. Now being able to see Arrakis for the first time, I was not impressed. It was very yellow and so far it didn't seem like there's a lot of diversity in the biomes. It would have been nice to see an ocean or a forest, but maybe that'll come later. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously there's a lot of sand in the Dune game, and you aren't punching trees for wood. Instead you're given a plasma cutter sort of mining tool in order to scan the resources you want to gather, then follow along the blue lines to break it. It is kind of a cool gimmick, but nothing to write home about. If the game was more resource mining / extraction heavy, I don't think the system would have been very fun, but so far it seems like mining rocks seems to take a backseat to everything else. I did think it was a cool way to cut through doors though, and behind the door I just cut was my first opponent. An introduction to the combat system of Dune. This is my introduction to the combat system of Dune, and let's just say, it is not the best. And again, this is where I had that familiar sense of deja vu with Conan Exiles. The combat is janky. It's not terrible or unplayable, but I would have expected a little bit more from a Dune game. It pretty much boils down to right click block, left click swings. You can also parry if you block at the right time, but honestly I never felt the need to parry ever. Even while a parry can stagger the enemy, which does become important later, you could just block the enemy's attacks, spam left click, and after 3 swipes the enemy is staggered anyway, so you can just deliver more damage. If you hold left click though, you do a slower, heavier attack. This is cool, and it's also why staggering is important, because some enemies have shields that you can't just swing through. So you have to stagger them, then do a slow melee to pierce their shield, which I thought was actually pretty cool. Again, this combat isn't bad, but it doesn't feel like it should in my opinion. It will get the job done though. But I never encountered any PvP in my time playing. There is a PvP in the game, and from what I've heard, it's more of an endgame thing. I don't think this combat is going to get the job done. I think it's going to be very janky and honestly not that fun to fight other players. Maybe with the abilities you get as you level up and more ranged weapons it can be, but this is where the MMO part of the combat comes into play. As you level up, you unlock new skills, passive, and techniques. Seemingly, you can equip 3 skills and 3 techniques, while passive you can use as many as you want. There are also multiple skill trees, but I chose a sword skill tree. My starting ability was, again, a bit janky. Holding Q, my character would rush to the target I selected, kneeing them and instantly killing them, which looked janky, and sometimes I would fly past the enemy or get stuck on a rock. Again, not the worst, and it does get the job done. But finally, after fighting through the ship, I was able to use the emergency transmitter, which called in 3 ornithopters. Our friend pulled out his rocket launcher, shooting down another one before one of the other thopters landed and outstepped an enemy of Xantara. They quickly got into a fight, and Xantara won, but was unfortunately sliced in the back of the leg. The cutscenes in the beta weren't very optimized and took forever to load. I don't know if that's my problem or Dune's problem, but I did notice that throughout my whole playtime, the cutscenes were kind of janky and weird. We had to flee, so Xantara told me to fly the ornithopter. Unfortunately, this was all a cutscene and I wasn't able to fly an ornithopter here, but upon full release, they do say you can fly a thopter. As we were being chased, Xantara told me to fly into the sandstorm to avoid the enemies, and we crashed shortly after. Upon waking up, our friend had of course ran away, then told us to run very fast because the sandworm was approaching. As we ran away, the sandworm launched out of the sand, devouring the crashed thopter. And I was finally set free in the open world. Xantara would be in my ear, essentially instructing me on how to survive in the desert. In the open sands of Dune Awakening, vibrations can attract sandworms, so you have to be very deliberate in how you move to avoid them. So I attempted to do the sand walk, and it worked out pretty well. Another cool mechanic I liked was during the day you had to stick to the shadows to prevent yourself from getting dehydrated due to the heat. Also, probably don't want to get sunburned. I left all my sunscreen back in the ornithopter. Upon reaching the safety of some rocks, I saw 2 other players, but they didn't seem interested in me, nor was I in them. I had to survive, and out here, I couldn't trust anybody. So I gathered some resources to make myself some makeshift armor, and I looked pretty cool. Then I was instructed to place a respawn beacon, so I decided to do it at the top of a rock cliff. But when I got up there, there was a ship floating through the sky, which spotted me and I was lifted up, unable to move. Honestly, this scared me a bit at first, but I thought it was really cool and made the world seem alive. A bunch of enemy troops were sent down and I had to fight them. They downed me a few times, but with bandages in my inventory, I was able to revive myself.
So-called noble war. But that's to your advantage, off-worlder. Allow them to do the hard work.
I did this multiple times until I eventually killed them all. The AI is not very smart in this game, which kind of adds to the jank of the combat.
They would do the same to you.
Either way, the enemies didn't have much loot, so I placed my respawn beacon and kept going. Eventually, I was told to craft a shelter, so I did, and if I do say so myself, it was quite nice. Before I continue, if you like this video and want to see more videos like this, you should definitely subscribe for more. Also, join my Discord, which is linked down below. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch, also linked down below. Enjoy the rest of the video. My shelter was pretty nice. It even had windows to look out at all the sand, I guess. Well, I'm not much of a builder myself. The build in this game seemed quite nice and once again reminiscent of Conan Exiles. I'm sure all the builders and crafters out there will be quite happy with it. After I built my home and furnished it with some generators, I was getting thirsty, so it was time to deal with the water situation. Zentara explained that there are a few different sources of water, but the best one is blood. So I crafted a blood extractor to harvest the water off the corpses of my enemies. Doing so would allow me to either drink the blood if I was that desperate, or refine it at my base into pure water. And this was one of the coolest parts of the game to me. Instead of having to craft some intricate water pipe system, the only way to survive is to kill, and I thought it was really unique. Until I went and extracted some blood and I got it from his ass. Didn't seem like the best or most sanitary place to harvest blood from, but a man has got to drink. After getting enough blood to sustain my water-based diet, I went back to my base and refined the blood. After that, Zentara told me I was probably getting high off the spice of Arrakis, and I guess I agreed because I fainted and went on a spice-fueled trips in my dreams. After reaching the end of my dreams, the spice told me to go to a valley, so naturally, I listened. But first, I had to relog as for some reason the game locked me out of attacking. I couldn't use my weapons nor abilities, but logging back in seemed to fix it. So after that minor setback, I continued to the first trial. At this point, I was enjoying Dune Awakening, but going back to the artificial limiting of the beta keys, I feel like I would have had a lot more fun co-op with friends. Walking through the open sands to the cave in my dream, a worm jumped out next to me, and it startled me a little bit. But being the brave soldier I was, I kept pushing forward. Upon reaching the first trial, I found an ancient cave, and inside there was some spice sitting out on a nice tray for me, so I took a huff and entered the dream world. The spice hallucination was pretty basic. I saw holograms of Fremen and had to avoid an eyeball or else it would burn me to death in my dreams, I guess. And are we sure this was Spice and not Freddy Krueger? After that, it was time to up my game if I wanted to survive in this harsh environment, so I needed to craft a still suit to drink my own piss. But while looking for plant fiber to do so, I stumbled across a research outpost and decided to head on in. There were some enemies, but by this point I had crafted a gun and ammo for it was everywhere, so I just spammed fire at their head and most of the time they died before even hitting me. And if they didn't, they never did enough damage to kill me. I took everything I could from the research outpost and got a shield, but couldn't figure out how to use it. There was a mechanic in the game that was never really explained, but perhaps I hadn't gone far enough. Essentially, you have a power pack that can power anything you wear, for example the shield, so I'm assuming I just didn't have enough power. Also, very interestingly, different equipment like shields vibrate, so when you're on the open sands while wearing one, sandworms will be far more attracted to you. I also got a blueprint for a unique item that I'll be able to craft a bit later. Overall though, my trip into this research lab was successful, so I got back and crafted the still suit. The benefit of wearing the still suit is of course the ability to generate and store water in case of an emergency. And at this point, I was going to call it there for the weekend. I had enjoyed my time and while not perfect, I decided I was going to come back when the game launches. But on the last day, I decided to play a little bit more. When I got back on the next day, I was able to craft that unique schematic called the Emperor's Wings Mark I. It allowed me to float while falling or jumping, but using it on open sands was dangerous as it was labeled an extreme attractant of sandworms. So of course, the first thing I did was go out into the open sands and use it. Narrowly avoiding sandworms, I headed to my next objective. Zentara instructed me to head towards a trade post and I found a few other players there as well as some side quests. I picked up a contract to deliver copper and it was pretty simple. I did that, then picked up my next contract to head to a wrecked ship. I pretty easily killed all the enemies in the ship, but couldn't find what I needed for the contract, so I left the ship thinking I missed something. When I re-entered, I found all the loot had respawned, so I doubled up and got some more unique schematics. Still unable to find what I needed, but as I headed out, a ton of enemies respawned right in front of me, and actually ended up killing me. But it was no big deal, as I was kind of curious what death was like in Dune. Upon dying, I could respawn at the beginning I crafted towards the beginning of my playthrough, or respawn at the checkpoint, which is like 10 feet away from where I died. When I respawned, the game gave me a message saying that death on Arrakis was very unforgiving, and when I died, I dropped my backpack, so I assumed I had lost a ton of stuff. But when I looked, I lost nothing important other than a few resources and schematics. But dying in a sandstorm or to a worm does get rid of all your stuff, which again, I thought was pretty cool. So I retrieved my stuff, and that's where I really called it. I chose not to play anymore for a few reasons. While I did have plenty of time left in the beta, I just didn't feel like continuing. I didn't want to keep going and then pick up the game on launch only have to redo all this over again in only a few weeks. Another reason being I couldn't play with any of my friends, and that seemed much more fun than playing solo. Overall, I think $50 is pretty steep for what this game is offering. While I did have fun with my time, I think the game should be heavily considered before purchasing. But if you like Conan Exiles and the survival elements of that game, then I think you would definitely enjoy this game. And if you enjoy the world of Dune, this is a unique story in the Dune universe that's actually very interesting, and it really does feel like you're on Arrakis and you're fighting through the world of Dune. So you'll probably enjoy it if either of those are the case for you. I just think a lot of the mechanics are very surface level, for example the combat, and that's a pretty important one. And a big concern for me is lack of content. Dune is a fairly limiting IP and the game is already fairly limited in its combat and AI, so I can't imagine there being a ton of variety in enemies outside of PvP. There are vehicles you can unlock as you further progress the game, but you can't ride sandworms just yet. Although I believe it's been suggested that you might be able to ride sandworms in the future. Like I said though, lack of content is only a concern for me, if that makes sense. It's not the reality. I didn't feel that way when I was playing, just a concern I have for later down the line. This game did surprise me, and I still think there are a lot more fun surprises as you progress through the story. I imagine once you find the Fremen and unlock new areas of the map, the game has a lot more to offer. To answer the question at the beginning of the video, Dune Awakening is an MMO-like survival game with PvP content seemingly in the endgame. And I know I'll probably be playing more when the game releases. I want to hear your thoughts on this Dune game. If you didn't play it, what do you think? Are you going to pick it up on launch? And if you did play it, what did you think of the beta? And what did you think of my thoughts on the game? I appreciate you guys watching the end. If you liked the video, subscribe for more. Peace out.